All right, I think we will begin. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nicole Anderson, and I'm Associate Director of Tufts Alumni Career Services. Welcome to today's webinar, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Systemic Racism in Corporate America. A little bit about Tufts Alumni Career Services first. We have three main goals. We present programs like this, including webinars, and to come next semester, some virtual networking events to replace the in-person networking events that we usually facilitate. And these are for all alumni, all schools. And we've increased our offerings to help you during this time. Our second goal is to foster networking and connections between alumni and students, including a resource for alumni to alumni networking called The Herd, and you can check that out on our webpage. And finally, to provide individual career coaching services to graduates of arts and sciences, engineering, and the School of the Museum of Fine Arts. So now for today's webinar, we'll be presenting from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. During the presentation, you can type in your questions anytime into the Q&A box, and our speaker will address them at the end of her presentation. We will be recording this webinar, and it will be posted on our YouTube playlist on our website in about a week or so. So let me give you the bio for our presenter today, Patricia Figueroa. Patricia is an expert resume writer and career coach. As founder and CEO of the Career Glow Up LLC, she aims to assist entry, mid, and senior level professionals with fully optimized resumes, cover letters, and LinkedIn profiles through intensive and personalized career coaching. The Career Glow Up mission is for clients to live their dream, not dream their life. Prior to founding the Career Glow Up, Patricia was a corporate recruiter working for multiple Fortune 500 companies, including Dow Jones and Bank of America. She uses her inside knowledge of the interview and hiring processes to help her clients land the job of their dreams. And I'm excited to welcome Patricia today. I'll hand the presentation over to her. Thanks, Patricia.
Okay, thanks so much, Nicole, for that introduction. And I'd like to thank Tufts University for inviting me here today to give this webinar. And of course, I'd like to thank everyone who has attended the webinar as well. So, I just want to jump right into this, and I do look forward to answering your questions, at the end. So I am here today to discuss DEI and systemic racism in corporate America. And I think what's really important at the beginning of this is for us to define what DEI is, and then we can sort of delve into why it's important and why it matters so much. Sorry, give me one moment. So DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, so when we talk about diversity, we're referring to a multitude of identities. It can be race, gender, sexual orientation, gender expression, ethnicity, religion, and nationality. Okay, and when we talk about equity, what we are referring to is a systematic approach that ensures all individuals have equal access to the same opportunities. So this is really important, and I'm going to definitely discuss that more in a bit. And inclusion refers to people with different identities feeling leveraged, valued, and welcomed. Okay, so that's what DEI is in a nutshell, but let's look at why it's important. Okay, so first of all, I want to talk about a study that was done by McKinsey. Okay, and what they found out was that the most ethnically and culturally diverse boards worldwide are actually 43% more likely to experience higher profits. Okay, so from a financial standpoint, we can see from that study, diversity is extremely important. Okay, because at the end of the day, companies are in business to make money, right? They're not nonprofits, they're not charities. So that's a very important statistic, right? The more diverse the company is, the higher the profits. Okay, but sort of stepping outside of that financial perspective, diversity is important, because racism is still a huge issue. If we look at the list of current Fortune 500 CEOs as of 2020. Only 3 are Black, okay? So that's less than 1%. Only 9 are Hispanic, only 16 are Asian, none are Indigenous, and only 4 are openly LGBTQ+. Okay, so these are just absolutely abysmal numbers, right? So again, DEI is extremely important. Now, I want to talk about lack of Black talent. So hopefully you saw the quotation marks there. What I'm referring to, if you're not familiar, is about 2 months ago, the CEO of Wells Fargo made a statement, and I quote that, while I know this sounds like an excuse, the unfortunate reality is that there is a very limited pool of Black talent to recruit from, okay? He didn't only say this once, he actually said it twice. He first said it in an email, and then he repeated the exact same statement on a Zoom call with multiple employees, okay? So is it actually a lack of talent, or is it a lack of desire? And what I mean by that is it's not a lack of Black talent, right? I think we all intrinsically know that there are talented Black professionals across the country graduating at the top of their MBA classes from elite universities that are highly qualified, right? They're ready to come in and make an immediate impact at any organization that is willing to give them a chance, right? But why is it then that the CEO of the 4th largest bank in America refuses to see this, right? And I think, you know, to kind of answer that and to get behind what might be going on, we need to kind of take a deeper look at real D&I, okay? So what I mean by that is D&I, which is the same as DEI, right? Diversity, inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion, they're used pretty interchangeably. They've really become buzzwords almost, right? It's become very trendy for companies to talk about it on their company LinkedIn pages, on their social media pages, right? It's almost become like a hashtag movement, if you will, right? So a lot of social media activism, but nothing really tangible in real life, right? So it's like a lot of people are talking about it, but there's not a lot being done. So how do we actually move beyond the buzzwords then, right? Let's take a look at the diversity piece of that first, right? If the goal is to diversify employee populations more, you know, the candidate pipelines are going to have to be diversified more. So first, I want to just say really quickly what I mean by candidate pipeline. It's a recruitment term, and it refers to the fact that before a position even gets opened at a company, recruiters are always having to source candidates, right? So that they can have a pipeline of candidates available for when the jobs are actually posted online, right? So on LinkedIn, on Indeed, and different job boards like that, right? So, you know, I recruited for a long time. So, you know, you have to have, you know, diverse candidates in your pipeline, right? If you want to have them available to be hired, right? So what are some of the channels that companies can look at more, right, to source this diverse talent from? HBCU career fairs is a great place to source diverse talent. And when I say HBCU, I'm referring to historically Black colleges and universities, okay? So, you know, they have fairs multiple times a year, just like every other university does. And it's just a great idea for recruiters to attend these fairs, right? If you find, you know, juniors and seniors that want to come in and do internships at your organization, that's a really good way to then convert those interns later on after they graduate into permanent employees, right? Another idea for companies is to kind of move a little bit past just attending the career fairs, collecting the resumes and kind of checking the box and moving on, is to actually develop partnerships and relationships with these HBCUs, right? This can be built around maybe different degrees, right? So, you know, if it's a tech company, maybe you can, you know, start a tech program, right? With like Howard University or Morgan State or Spelman, right? Any HBCU that's out there, right? But it's about actually building a presence on these campuses, right? It's about the company raising their visibility, right? Like I said, instead of kind of just going to the career fairs and then popping off and they don't see you again for like 3 to 6 months. So that's definitely a way that companies can diversify their talent pipeline more, okay? Diversity job boards are another great way. So these are exactly like Indeed or ZipRecruiter. The difference is they exclusively focus on diverse candidates, okay? So a company would pay to have their job posting on a diversity job board, and then the diverse candidates that are signed up on this board would have the opportunity to review the postings and apply to them, okay? So again, this is another great way to just increase the amount of diverse employees in your candidate pipeline. Finally, having a really robust employee referral program is extremely important, right? So you'd want to look at what the bonus is, right? More importantly, it's like, do your diverse employees know about the program? I was a recruiter for over 5 years, and I was always surprised that outside of HR, a lot of people didn't really know what it was. It's like, yeah, it was mentioned one time when I started at the company 2 years ago, but I wasn't even told who to email about it, right? I wasn't told what the payout was. I wasn't told how long the referred person would have to work at the company until I got the bonus. That's not good, right? It should be a robust program that is constantly promoted, right? That's a really great way to get more diverse employees, right? You want your existing diverse employee population to tell their friends, right, about what hopefully great of a company they work at. So these are just a couple of ways that companies can definitely improve, again, like I said, their diverse candidate pipeline. But let's take a look at the internal diverse employee population, right? There's a couple of ways that companies can improve in that area as well in terms of offering professional development, okay, to diverse employees. I know that, when a company offers professional development, of course, it's to all of the employees, right? But again, just some things I observed being in HR for almost a decade is that a lot of them weren't aware of it, right? So when I would talk to people, they'd be like, what do you mean that LinkedIn Learning is offered for free, right? That's not good. People need to know about it. People need to know, well, how do I even access it? When I go into LinkedIn, I don't see anything. So there wasn't an awareness, right? So perception is reality. If people aren't aware of the perk, it basically doesn't exist, right? It's a great way then for the diverse employees that are already at your organization to have a way to, move up the corporate ladder, right? Because another huge problem is that when you get to leadership, senior leadership, and executive positions, there are not a lot of diverse employees that are in those employee populations, okay? Companies also want to take a closer look at developing career paths. When you look at studies that have been done, unfortunately, a lot of the lower paying positions in an organization are overwhelmingly filled by BIPOC. So when I say BIPOC, what I mean is Brown, Indigenous, people of color, right? So what companies want to do, instead of just leaving it to maybe the person getting a mentor on their own, or hey, it's their job to network if they want to move up in the company, they want to actually develop career paths, right? That are clear ways for that person to move up in the organization if they work hard and they perform well, right? So, excuse me, a quick example I'll give is if you have somebody who is a call center agent, right? They might not know what kind of a lateral move they can make, right? It's not that obvious. Maybe they don't want to stay in the call center and become a supervisor. So what does that person do? I know as someone who's a recruiter and a career coach that they have a lot of transferable skills. They've got people skills, they can diffuse tense situations, they're good with high volume, so they could easily move into an entry-level sales position. But if nobody's telling them that, a lot of them don't know that on their own. I know that because I recruited for a call center, right? So a lot of them give up and they end up in a dead-end career, or a lot of them just leave the company, right? So maybe after a year, they're just fed up and they're like, I'm leaving, right? Neither one of those things then, right, is good for a company, like I said, not only looking to diversify their population, their employee population, but you also want to work on moving your diverse employees up, like I said, the career ladder, right? And finally, companies want to encourage mentorship and sponsorship more, right? Mentorship is pretty well known, right? I mean, the mentor is obviously like an older, usually older, but definitely more experienced employee that can advise and encourage and support the mentee, right? So yes, I would say that most people are aware of those programs, and usually they're set up in some kind of an official capacity. However, sponsorship is different. I was in corporate America for 13 years before I started my business. I never had a sponsor. So what a sponsor does is different from a mentor, right? That's more of an ally who's going to really advocate for you, right? They're not just giving you advice on, hey, Patricia, this is how you recruit. They're advocating for you with senior leadership, okay? They might be standing up for you at a meeting that's like at an executive level. They might be going to their own supervisor and saying, hey, I think Patricia is great. Like, what do you think about giving her the stretch project, right? Or the stretch assignment. And then maybe if you get that project, it helps you get a promotion, right? Again, there have been studies done on this, and it's been shown that marginalized groups tend to not have sponsors, right? At the same rate as non-marginalized groups. And they're extremely important, right? In terms of just navigating the politics, right? That, tend to occur in an office setting. And, like I said, being promoted, right? So instead of leaving it to people to figure that out, right? And it's like, hey, it's up to you to grab coffee then with somebody who's higher level, right? It's up to you to network. Companies might want to take a look at having official sponsorship programs like they do with mentorship, right? I really do believe that would help, again, the diverse employee population move up in the company, right? And get into those positions of leadership. But yeah, listen, I know that money talks, right? So at the same time, some of these initiatives do cost money, right? It's going to cost money for your recruiters to register at a career fair at HBCU. It's going to cost money to post a job ad on a diversity job board. But at the end of the day, for the McKinsey study that I quoted before, it's really an investment that's priceless, right? It's been proven in multiple studies that when you invest that money to diversify your employee population, it is going to pay significant dividends, and it's just the right thing to do, right? So yeah, at the end of the day, there's no excuse. If you go back to the Wells Fargo CEO statement, he literally starts it off by saying, I know it sounds like an excuse. So it's like, yeah, because I think even he knew it was an excuse, right? There's no excuse for a company to not have a diverse workforce, okay? And, if they're claiming otherwise, look, at that point, they're just refusing to examine their own unchecked biases, right? This is just like a sampling of things that companies can do, right, in order to diversify their talent pool. So that's the diversity piece, right? I want to talk about real inclusion, right? Because it's not as simple, right? A lot of the pieces with diversity are initiatives, right? It's like, well, just recruit more at HBCUs, just get on diversity job boards. But how do you actually have real inclusion? So I want to start this off just by asking if any of you have ever been the only. If you want to just kind of think about that, if you've ever found yourself in that situation. Now, I know when I say that, some of you might not know what I'm referring to. So when I say the only, I mean, are you a BIPOC or a member of a marginalized, underrepresented group that has ever shown up, let's say, like I did, for the first day of work, and you look around your entire department of 100 people, and I was the only Black person. So I was a little taken aback, right? I wasn't expecting that. So it was a lonely feeling, right? 100 people's a lot of people for me to be the only Black person, right? So the point I'm making is this. A lot of companies, I feel, only focus on the diversity recruiting initiatives, right? So I worked very closely at a company I was at with their D&I team. And it was like, okay, hey, Patricia, like we need to get, the number of Black employees is at 5%. It has to get up to 8%. But that's it. It would stop there. So every single thing that the recruitment team and I was doing is like, okay, we got to get it up by 3 percentage points. And the thing is, that's great, I guess, right? So like if you get those additional employees into the building, but it's almost like, what good is it if when they show up like I did, they look around and they're the only and they feel utterly alone, right? So my point is that diversity recruitment practices are important, right? You can't diversify the talent pool without hiring more diverse employees, but it's just simply not enough, right? The culture of the company matters. So the question that really needs to start being asked a little bit more, in my opinion, is how do companies create a culture of inclusion, right? So that's the I, right? I think there's almost too much focus on the D and not enough focus on the I. So, employee resource groups are a great way to do this, right? So at one of the companies I worked at when I got there were no employee resource groups. And then this is recent, I'm talking about within the last year and a half, right? So again, I was a little surprised, right? I think most companies have had ERGs, as they're referred to, for a while, right? It's just a great way of including people, right? It's like, these are ways for people to feel supported and encouraged. So just to explain a bit more of what an employee resource group is, if we go back to my definition, it's not mine, the definition of diversity, where I was talking about different identities, whether it's Black employees, Hispanic employees, Asian employees, LGBTQ plus employees, it's groups, right? Where these employees of those identities can come together and just support each other, encourage each other, advise each other. Sometimes just talk about the experiences that they've had at the company. It's a safe space that, for many of these people doesn't really exist outside of the group, right? Where they can feel really alone. So that's a great way, okay? And a lot of times these groups do things for fun, right? Like they'll go out and see movies together and do different things, right? So it's also kind of a great way to just establish relationships with people outside of your department, right? And also comprehensive employee onboarding, right? So I don't mean like you show up your first day, there's a pen and a notebook on your desk and hey, that's your onboarding, right? What companies want to look to do, so to go back to the first bullet point, hopefully the company has ERGs. So, when the employee shows up on the first day, maybe have a pamphlet that goes through the ERGs that tells them a little bit about them, maybe have a contact email, right? How do I join? Like, who am I reaching out to? Like, is it HR? These things sometimes aren't thought about, but they're super important. If you're brand new and you don't know anybody, you probably don't even know the company has an ERG. So just employee onboarding that's more comprehensive, that thinks about these things, I think is super important. It can make all the difference in the world, from just feeling like you're alone for months at a time and then being like, wait, there is an employee resource group for Black employees, right? So these are things that I think can really help, right? Diverse employees in senior management and executive positions, right? This is super important. If you're starting to look around and going, wow, how come there's no one who's diverse in Exco, right? Why are none of the senior leaders in this company diverse? It starts to obviously turn you off from the company, right? It's kind of like, what's going on, right? So as my previous slide was alluding to, right, companies are really going to want to focus in on ways that they can develop their diverse employees, right? And then town halls, right? Maybe during the pandemic, obviously these would be virtual town halls, right? They wouldn't be in person, but just town halls where BIPOC employees can share issues and concerns that they have, right? Whether it's something that's come up, whatever the case may be, right? But a specific town hall for that, right? Just to show that the company does care, right? That they want to hear these things and that they have a willingness to address them, right? And then finally, the leadership of the company. And I'm including the CEO in this, right? If it's possible, it's not always possible. Being willing to listen to and engage with BIPOC employees. The second part is so important, right? It's not just send an email or go to your HRG, your HR generalist, right? That's a little bit dismissive, right? But I can say at one of the companies I was at, the CEO actually had a fireside chat with the Black Employee Resource Group, and he was like, look, I know that we could be better at some things, right? And he actually sat down, and the group, I think, only had about 100 people, right? And it was a very, I would say, it was a constructive dialogue, and it was a good start. That's what I would say, because he didn't have a defensive posture. He wasn't confrontational. He listened to everything. And, it was a very interesting conversation. But there has to be a willingness for that to even happen, right? Then it has to be set up, right? He actually flew in to do that, right? So the leadership has to care. But these are some ways, right, that companies can really foster that culture of inclusion. Okay. And then, I want to talk about see something, say something. So what do I mean by that? What I'm getting at is that silence is complicity, and that even in the workplace, right? Because I know things can be harder, we're at work, right? But there is no such thing as an innocent bystander. What I'm talking about is even at work, I know it's harder, right? It's not like it's a family dinner for Thanksgiving or something, but if you see behavior that is unacceptable, right? Racist behavior, prejudiced behavior, bigoted behavior, even if it's somebody that has a higher job title than you, right? You still need to do something about that in a professional way, right? I'm not telling anyone to get in somebody's face, right? But something needs to be said. When nothing is said and people are silent, or people pretend they don't hear, or they just put their face down in their laptop, that's how the behavior is perpetuated, right? So I just kind of want to go through some examples of what I'm talking about and what I think a helpful response could be from an ally, okay? So let's just say there's a BIPOC that is frequently interrupted and talked over in meetings. And really quickly, of course, I know that, most of the things on this slide, sure, they happen to people that, that aren't, minorities, but it does happen to minorities more, right? So I do want to focus in on that. So again, BIPOC frequently interrupted and talked over in meetings time and time again. Somebody who wants to be an ally can say something as simple, I would say, as, excuse me, I think BIPOC was trying to say something, right? Again, I'm not saying to be confrontational, right? That you're at work, like be a professional about it, but just standing by and ignoring it, I don't think is the right thing either. And this is something that did happen to me all of the time when I was in corporate America, right? And then, kind of going on to the next bullet point, let's say there's a BIPOC that has project ideas that are being stolen or that they're not receiving credit for, right? This is something that somebody, if they notice this, could bring to the attention of the BIPOC supervisor. And, again, that is something that happened to me, unfortunately, right, during my time in corporate America. Let's say that there's a BIPOC on your team, right, or even in your department, right, but they're making significantly less money, okay, than someone with the same job title and experience. So usually that would be, that would be you, right, universal you, right, because you probably don't know what someone else is making, right? And that happened to me. And in that example, the person pulled me aside and was like, I literally can't do this anymore, right? You are making so much less than I am. And it's ridiculous because you actually have more experience than me. And I had no idea. And I think that goes to something with the culture, like at least in America, like we're taught to never talk about money. Money is a private matter. It's hush hush, right? It's sensitive, keep it to yourself. But in this instance, right, you need to advise that BIPOC of the salary differential, okay? That's not something that should be happening. And they obviously probably don't know, right? It's not, I didn't walk around every day and go, hey, what are you making? What are you making, right? Like I didn't know, I assumed that everybody was making what I was. But that's something that the BIPOC needs to know about so that they can take that to their supervisor and to HR, right? So it can be addressed. Let's go to the next bullet point, which is, so this is somebody saying this, Ebonic slang is unprofessional. And this is actually something I heard. It was not said about me, It was when I was a recruiter, and it was said about a candidate who was absolutely amazing. He had more experience than almost anybody else who had been hired. And everyone had signed off on him. It's like, Patricia, he's great, he's great. And then there was one person who was like, no. And when I challenged it, this was what was said back to me, okay? And that's ridiculous, okay? Because the fact is he met every single requirement that was on that job description, okay? So if you hear this said about a coworker, let's say though, right? Look, that person's in the building just like everyone else is. So that means they got through the recruitment process, right? They got past the recruiter, the hiring manager. They have the right to be there just like anyone else. And the fact is, Ebonics is actually referred to as AAVE. What that stands for is an African American Vernacular English, and it is recognized as a vernacular of English. So some people don't know this, some people don't care to know this, but whether they care to know or not, it's a fact, right? Again, it's just standing up, right? And not letting unacceptable behavior slide, right? And finally, XYZ is so ghetto, okay? That's sometimes said about a person, about a movie, about a song. I heard it said about an entire city. So I know that Tufts is in Massachusetts. I'm in New Jersey, so it was said about a city that I live nearby. And listen, that is an extremely racist thing to say, okay? To use ghetto as a pejorative like that. And the city it was said about is literally like over 90% Black, okay? So some people maybe would find ghetto as an extremely racist term. If that's a little bit too much, you know, if you're at work, it can be as simple as, you know, please don't say that again, right? So again, it's not about being confrontational or getting in someone's face, but it is about calling the behavior out, right? That's really the only way I think that it's going to stop, right? Is if people don't just ignore it or pretend it's not happening or kind of look away or look down at their phones and call it out for what it is. Okay, and then I actually am somebody that thinks DEI should be treated like everything else. Now, hopefully that doesn't sound dismissive. Let me explain what I mean by that, okay? DEI, if it's ever actually going to be taken seriously, needs to be treated exactly like the things I have listed below, okay? And it's not right now. So let me explain. An employee's bonus is tied to the company's EBITDA. So really quickly, if you don't know what EBITDA is, it's earnings before income tax, depreciation, and amortization, okay? So what that basically means, to oversimplify, is just how did the company perform, right? It's an oversimplification, but it is directly tied to that. And so are salary raises. I know this because when I was a recruiter, I sat right next to compensation, and the comp people would just tell me that all the time. Like, no, the ceiling for salary raises this year is 2.5%, not 3%, okay? What the CEO gets paid is tied to the company's revenue, right? The company's Fortune 500 rank, right, is tied to the company's top performance. The CEO's very job security, right, whether he loses his job or not, is tied to the company's performance. The question that I have is, why isn't DEI tied to any of those things, right? If DEI was actually taken seriously, and it wasn't just a buzzword, it wasn't just hashtag, a trendy thing, it would be. So I mean, like, specific metrics would be tied to these things, right? If, you know, the diverse employee population doesn't go up by, I'm making this up, but 2 percentage points by next fiscal year, then none of the executive leaders get an employee bonus. Yeah, I promise you it's going to get taken seriously if you say that, because the executives don't want to lose their bonus, right? Then all of a sudden there's going to be money now for DEI, right? Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we don't have money to go to Atlanta. Like, you're going to have money now to go to the HBCU career fairs in Atlanta. So until that happens, it's not really going to go beyond where we're at now. And I feel like where we're at now is performative posts on social media. Additionally to that, I also think that we have to move beyond the trainings, okay? So to kind of expound on that a little bit, there's nothing wrong with the trainings that take place, right? They're informative, they're necessary, they're educational. I'm talking about the trainings at work. However, I think to truly understand the concepts that are behind DEI to really understand racism, to really understand unconscious bias, you need to go past these company mandated workshops and trainings, and you need to raise your consciousness, okay? So how would you go about doing that? I think that you need to read and examine. So what I'm trying to get at is that it doesn't stop at a 45-minute lunch and learn, okay? One of the problems I observed, I went to so many of these because I was in HR, like I said, is you're at work, right? So even if you're engaged and you care, and I do care about DEI, obviously, I'm sorry, but like I have 100 emails, right, that I have to get back to. I didn't have time maybe today. Literally, I didn't have time to go to this, but my supervisor was like, hey, Patricia, you have to go. You're in HR. Everybody in HR has to show up to this thing to show that it's important. So I'm sitting there, my phone is buzzing with IMs. I have a million unread emails. I have 50 phone screens I have to do. I have 20 people I have to send offer letters to. That's not a genuine place where you're open to learning, right? You're honestly just waiting for it to end. So what I'm suggesting is, on top of attending these company mandated trainings and workshops, you also want to do some self-education on your own time where you can actually breathe, you're not at work, right? So something I would really suggest is reading, right? One of my favorite books of all time, I read it a long time ago, but I'll never forget it, made an impact on me, is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. And I can't recommend it highly enough. It's about, I'm overly simplifying, but the colonialization of an African country, okay? But it goes from there. And I don't even want to tell you more than that. I don't want to spoil it. It's an amazing book. Some others I would suggest is Blood in My Eye and Their Eyes Were Watching God. But there are literally so many out there. And I promise you that you're going to learn more reading from people's individual perspectives than you're going to learn sitting at a table at work with 10 other people. And it's like, here's your worksheet, fill it out. What are your unconscious biases after watching this video? It's not the same, right? I would also suggest, like, speak to someone outside of work. You can speak to people at work too, right? I'm saying do both, but actually talk to somebody from a different race, culture, ethnicity, whatever, you know, whatever that identity is, different from yours, and ask them questions from an intentional, genuine, and open place. That's really important, right? You might be really surprised what you hear back, right? Even if this person is like a friend of yours from high school or college, or who knows, maybe you've worked with them for 5 years, it's like, you really might be surprised at some of the experiences that they've had with racism, with bigotry, with prejudice, and just really approach it, like I said, from a very open place. I really believe you'll learn more from that, right? And then finally, just the examining point of it. It's just really deeply and honestly examine yourself, right? Like, you do it yourself, not a worksheet telling you what to do. I think there's a place for that, but I think there's also a place for you just sitting with yourself alone on your own time and just examine yourself for your unconscious biases and prejudices. And then finally, it is about more than a black square. And please let me explain what I mean by that. I was totally, with that Black Square movement on Instagram over the summer, if you know what I'm talking about. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about corporate America. So if you all are on LinkedIn, when that was taking place, corporate America really jumped in and tried to capture the moment. That's how I felt, right? I live on LinkedIn. But it became like the battle of the woke. So I would notice one company would post something on LinkedIn, and then another company is appearing like they're trying to outdo them, right? It became this desperate competition, I'm more woke than you, woke AF, right? They're trying to outdo each other in their wokeness, and it failed miserably, okay? It was not sincere, to put it lightly. And I'll give you an example for a company that I worked at pretty recently, and my friend was still there. And the company put up this post on LinkedIn. It was after, everything that happened, or the tragedies, I'm sorry to say that way, that happened over the summer. And it was directly after what happened to George Floyd. So they put up this very long post, and they were talking about what they were going to do. We're going to spend millions of dollars so on and so forth. We've hired a Black Chief Human Resources Officer. We've brought in a VP of D&I, so on and on and on. And she reached out to me and she was like, I'm in tears. So I was like, wow, what's wrong? And she's like, I was 5 minutes late sending my supervisor a report and I got completely chewed out in a meeting in front of everybody. And this is the day after, you know, the video with George Floyd, right? So just obviously imagine how traumatic that is, right? For a person of color, which my friend is. And her supervisor couldn't even just give her 5 minutes. But this is the same literal day that that very long post was posted about how great they are with D&I, how much they care. They were posting things about Black Lives Matter, right? So huge disconnect, right? And it's a front, right? It's a front to appear woke when that's not what's happening inside the company. So the Black squares on Instagram aren't enough, right? The empty platitudes and, you know, posts on LinkedIn aren't enough. So it can't stop with social media. Okay, it can't. If corporate America really wants to show that they take DEI seriously, and if they want us to take them seriously, right, when it comes to DEI, they're gonna have to do a lot more than this fake social media like hashtag activism stuff, right? There's gonna have to be real action from them, right? That's tied to real targets and numbers, as I alluded to in my previous slide, period. That is the only way it's going to change. Trust me, if the CEO thinks that his job is on the line, right? If movement doesn't happen, he's going to start to care then. And then when the CEO cares, right? ESCO, like the leaders under him care. And then it starts to, you know, basically trickle down to the rest of the company. But that's the only thing that's actually going to move this forward, right? Beyond this fake social media activism stuff. So basically what I'm saying is consequence is no coincidence. I'm not sure if I just dated myself there. I'm quoting from a Lauryn Hill song. It's one of the best songs of all time. So it's called Lost Ones. It's an amazing hip hop song. If you don't know it, look it up. But consequences are necessary, okay? That's the way it is with anything else in corporate America. I worked at so many Fortune 500 companies. Everything else is like that but DEI. Like, don't people wonder why that is, right? Consequences are needed, okay? So like I just said, if a company doesn't meet its specific diversity targets, so a lot of companies, they're very careful to not be specific, right? So like, I'll give an example. At a company that I worked at, they had said to me, you know, Patricia, our diversity numbers are so amazing now. Like we're at over 15% for people of color, whatever the person said to me. And I was looking around me and I'm like, there's no way. Like, I haven't seen anybody unless I, you know, bumped into the janitor. It's like, what am I missing? But when I started to dig through the numbers and I started asking for like reports and stuff, it's like, oh, okay, you know, they're counting, the company had a very large population of employees from India, right? So they were combining those employees in with the Black employees. But they kept saying like, people of color, you know what I mean? So they were trying to kind of get away from the fact that they actually had a Black employee population below 5%. So this is what I mean, specific targets, right? Break the groups out and start being honest, right? And start sharing that information. Like it took me so long and I was a recruiter just to get that information. So stop hiding it. Have specific diversity targets in terms of hiring goals and percentage of diverse leaders and everything else having to do with DEI. And if you don't meet those as a company, then consequences need to follow, right? Like I said before, loss of bonuses for executives, everything up to and including the CEO being fired, right? Because at the end of the day, either DEI matters or it doesn't, right? There isn't this like middle ground, which is what I feel is where we're at right now. And, you know, now I'll be more than happy to take questions from you all.
Hi, Patricia. Thank you so much. We do have some questions that came in. So let me start actually with, could you clarify the acronym BIPOC? Is it Black or is it Brown, Indigenous people of color?
It is Brown, Indigenous people of color. I'm pretty sure I had looked that up before the presentation. So Yeah, it's brown, Indigenous people of color.
Okay, because someone had written that she thought it was Black Indigenous people of color. So,
Okay,
so
I
we can look
want to
at,
say I could potentially, maybe I'm incorrect. The reason really quickly, Nicole, I just want to say, I was trying to pick a term that captured like as many, you know what I mean, as many like underrepresented groups as I could. But yeah, if I'm wrong about that, I apologize. But that's what I thought the term meant.
so let me go to another question or a couple of questions. This summer was incredibly heavy on the mental state of BIPOCs, and not everyone has the capacity for the emotional labor that is involved. How do I avoid making it worse for them?
That's a really good question. And I don't know if there's a generic answer I can give, because people are so different when it comes to personalities, right? And that's really what I was getting at when I said about when you approach people, coming to them from an open, genuine, sincere place, right? Sometimes what I've told people is maybe take a look at their social media, right? If they're not talking about it much, or, you know, if you haven't seen any mention of it, maybe it is just too much for them, right? Because you had a wide spectrum. There were people who were sharing the videos, right? And you go from that one extreme to people, like I said, who didn't say anything the whole summer, right? So I think barring that though, let's say maybe somebody doesn't have a social media page, maybe just reaching out and saying, I'm here about anything you want to talk about, right? Regarding, you know, I don't know how I would word it. Maybe something as simple as saying, I'm here, right? Because I think if you start to fill in that statement, you could be off, right? I think sometimes that's all people want to hear, right? I think sometimes it goes too far and people are doing too much, right? People are sending like a 6-paragraph text, and maybe that person's been crying for 2 hours. They don't need 6 paragraphs of text from somebody. So maybe something as simple as, I'm here if you ever want to talk, I think is the good starting point, and let them take the lead.
Let me ask another question that came in from an attendee. This person writes, I'm a new member of my company's management. What do you recommend on how to assess and start to improve our D&I performance?
That's a great question. The first thing I would say is make sure you have accurate metrics, which is what I was referring to, I think on my last slide. A lot of times companies group minority groups together to make certain statistics look better than they are. So I'd make sure you actually have the correct statistics on the different, you know, minority groups that are at the company. And then I would really work very closely with, I don't know if this individual is in recruitment, but very closely with recruitment. And if there is a D&I team, that's, you know, a separate team, working closely with the two teams to put together a plan. Because I also think it's too often where D&I is kind of off on its own, apart from recruiting, doing its own thing. And that's not going to work, right? Because the recruitment practices are going to have to change. So I would say it's definitely a collaborative group effort. And then, you know, speaking maybe with the leaders of those two teams to figure out, how are you going to get buy-in from the higher ups, right? How are you getting buy-in from the chief human resources officer? So I think it's a combination of things that, you know, would need to happen.
Okay. Let's see. This is related, or maybe a clarification of one of the questions earlier, which is, how do I ask questions, including those that might be ignorant, in a sensitive way?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I didn't want to cut you off. I understand where the person is coming from, because this is so sensitive, right? And the last thing you want to do is offend people. So I get that. But I do think that if you're really honest and genuine, it's your demeanor a lot of the time, right? Like, I think that, this is my opinion, that a lot of times people can tell if you're coming from a genuine place, right? If you're literally going to the person, you're saying, I really am not educated about these issues, right? Like, I was not taught them growing up. Like, there was no class back in the day about racial topics, right? So I'm not educated, but I want to be. Like, if you're that honest and you open yourself up like that and you're vulnerable, I think very few people are going to come back to you negatively. And if they do, I would kind of question that person a little bit, right? Because there's nothing wrong with admitting that you lack knowledge in this area and that you're seeking it. Like, that to me is one of the goals of DEI. So that's how I would approach it.
Okay. Let's see. One of our attendees did write in that BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. The intention behind the term is to acknowledge that not all people of color, POC, face the same levels of injustice. By listing out Black and Indigenous, the term emphasizes that people from these specific communities face different and more severe forms of injustice and oppression. So I wanted to thank that panelist for that.
Okay, thank you. And like I said, then I apologize because I was incorrect about that, but I do thank that person for clarifying.
Let's see. Here's a good question. How do you prove that you really want to listen as opposed to making it just one moment in time? Like, not a reactionary, but not a reactionary approach, but a thoughtful one that takes into account people's past, which could be potentially negative experiences with the organization and elsewhere.
That is a very good question. I want to give me 1 second to really think about that, because I do think there is the problem of some people are not genuine and not sincere, right? So it can be difficult to navigate, right? I definitely don't want to oversimplify it in my answer to this person. I do think give the person a little bit of space. And what I mean by that, right, is I notice that sometimes the people that aren't so genuine don't do that, right? It's like, give me the books, give me the authors, give me the, give me this. Is there a movie? And it's just like almost like an onslaught. And it's like, whoa, right? Like, I'm not Google, right? Like, I'm happy to suggest things and talk to you and all of the things, but it's like, if you approach someone, it's kind of like an onslaught, it can come off wrong, even if you're just genuinely interested and excited. So I would say kind of, you can ask in a way that gives some space, and then it lets you kind of test the waters, if that makes sense, right? If the person doesn't seem overly receptive, maybe kind of just like chill that out, right? But if the person comes back and like you all heard me talking about things fall apart, I was genuinely excited, right? So I think you have to sometimes just see how the person comes back to you, and not be overpowering in your approach with them, if that makes sense.
Good. Here's a good one. More often than not, HR is more aligned with management, and many frontline and lower level employees don't feel safe pointing out inequality in their unit for fear of retaliation. What can an HR organization do to be more approachable?
That's a very good question. And it's difficult to answer because it's something that I also went through myself. I think maybe just admitting that. Very, very few organizations are going to admit what that individual just said, right? For a whole bunch of reasons, because then the HR generalists go running and go, are you talking about me? Like, who's that comment about, right? And of course, you're not naming names, but just saying, look, I realize there's a perception, right, generally about HR, that it's very difficult to bring some of these issues to, because you don't know, are they, sometimes even going to go to the manager you're talking to, right? I think maybe it's kind of like not being afraid of the reprisal from some of the people that are in that area, and just risking it to try to foster a more open dialogue where people in the company do feel comfortable coming forward.
Let's see, a couple more questions coming in. Well, here's a compliment. Patricia, this is from Margaret. I was in the corporate world for 30 years. Oh, wait, let's see. That one just, I was in the corporate world for 30 years and consulting for 20 years as an HR generalist for 12 years and 38 in compensation. Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. I really appreciate that.
Let's see. Here's an attendee asking, how do you propose engaging with the Black BIPOC community, whether in corporate culture or for other groups, when they are turned off in general by the existing situation or historical experiences with the organization?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Nicole.
I was, the person goes on to say, how do you prove that you're not just making it a moment, but a movement, and really want to listen and amplify their voices?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I just want to point out, I love these questions because so many of them are pointing at, are you being genuine and are you being sincere, right? And that's such a big part of all of this. I think that if the company has an employee resource group, right, which I really hope that most companies do at this point, join the group, right? Like if you're a manager, whatever level you are, right? But let's say if you're a manager, you're in HR, join the group and have those conversations. I remember at the company I mentioned that didn't have the ERG when I started, and they finally started one. I would talk to people in HR and I'm like, why aren't you joining, right? Like this is what people say, like, Patty, why are you even in HR? Like there's a reason you're the only Black person. And they'd say, well, they don't want me there, is what the answer would be. And it's like, how do you know? You never even showed up to one meeting. Who's the mysterious they, right? So I understand the feeling sometimes, but then I would encourage them to even come with me. And it's like, I know you, we work in HR together. They'd say no. So it's sometimes be uncomfortable. That would be my answer, right? Get a little uncomfortable. Show up, and sometimes you do have to take that risk, right? But more likely than not, when people see that you're making an effort, like you don't have to stay after work to come to a meeting. Everybody has a life outside of work. People respond to that usually in kind. Like, okay, you took the time, you showed up, you didn't have to, it's 5 p.m. You could be making dinner for your kids, but you're here, right? With the Black ERG. And a lot of times people will respond positively to that. So I would say if there is an ERG set up to show up to the meetings and engage in the dialogues that are taking place.
Okay, so let's see. Here's a question. How do you begin to engage in this process when you don't have firsthand experience with discrimination? Do you hire a DEI consultant? Do something in-house?
Yeah, I would say in that case, honestly, I think it's worth it to talk to a D&I consultant just to get their perspective. I think some people kind of are reluctant to do that for some reason, but I think that those D&I specialists and consultants exist for a reason, right? And that's exactly what they're there to do, just like any other consultant, right? They can really walk you through, they can guide you, advise you. And I think it would put some weight behind the decisions you then make, right? You didn't just kind of make it off the cuff, doing the best you could. You talk to a specialist in that area, and I think it gives you more confidence, right? So the approach comes off better.
Let's see. Here's another one. This is similar. What do you think, and maybe this is too much of an overlap, but I want to read it. What do you think of the use of DEI consultants versus a do-it-yourself for a small 4-person organization with an entirely white 20-member board? There is concern among board members that we just don't have the perspective to know what to do, that it would seem ingenuine if our efforts originated from a group of people who don't have firsthand experience with discrimination. I know that was kind of long.
No,
so
that's
fine.
Oh, sorry, Nicole, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off because I was making notes as you spoke. It's a great question. I do think that's where D&I consultants come in. And let me say, I want to say really quickly, I know money is a thing, right? That's why I even included it in one of my slides. I get it, like the smaller you are, like I run a single member LLC, right? So I totally get it, but I just think that this is really important. And it's one of those areas that investment has to be made. Maybe don't sign a contract, right? Most, obviously DEI consultants are signing a contract with them. Maybe just see if you can pay to talk to them for 2 hours even, right? Like that's something I do. Like I'll jump on a Zoom call, right? And I'm more than happy to talk for 1 or 2 hours. Even doing something like that and having that conversation, I think is better than kind of going it alone and trying to piece things together from 50 different blocks.
Okay. And let's see, maybe this will be our last question because we're right at 2:01. I work in HR and recruiting, but I'm under the HR director and the COO. What are some of the strategies for bringing these issues to their attention to drive change? Being someone who has a lot of decision-making power in hiring, but not in company policy.
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? And my answer, at least, is that the facts went out at the end overall, or they should, right? It's really hard to argue with numbers. So I think sometimes this is what I did. I had no power at the company I was talking about. I was a temporary consultant. So I wasn't even an employee, right? But I would constantly say, why aren't you showing these numbers to anybody outside of HR, right? And I said that to the head of HR. I did. And it's like, hey, you want to end my consultancy, end it, right? Because the thing is awkward. Like, I'm the only Black recruiter here, and these numbers aren't even reflecting reality. So I'm not saying to do it in a confrontational manner, obviously at that level as a director, but I am saying that the facts are, and the figures are on the side of people that are pushing for this change, right? The numbers are abysmally low at most of the companies that we're talking about, right? And most of the time, HR does not want those numbers really getting out. I can't speak for everybody, but that was my experience in Fortune 500 companies. So I think if you keep kind of hammering on that point, it gets really hard for them to not admit that. So at least for me, that's the approach I would take, and that's the approach I did take.
We actually did have a few more coming in. If you have time to answer a few more, which I'm juggling, I'm going back and forth between our Q&A and our chat.
I do, that's fine.
Can we take a few more?
Yes.
Do you have any reflections on DEI work by companies outside the US? Is DEI being handled better or worse, for example, in Europe?
That's an excellent question that I want to be fully transparent. I would have to look into that a bit more because honestly, all of my work, at least when I was a recruiter, did focus on the US, but it's a really great question that I'd have to look into.
Okay. Let's see. I'm in management at a global firm, and we are trying to get correct metrics. How do you ensure metrics as race and ethnicity is based upon self-declaration?
Yes, this is a very difficult question, in my opinion, because at least in the applicant tracking system, ATS, that I used in the companies I worked at, the information that was checked off by the candidate was not visible to HR. So I'd have to honestly look into that. I don't want to answer that off the cuff, just to be honest. But I'm more than happy to follow up with that individual. But it's complicated. It's not straightforward.
All right, let's see. Here's another one. I encounter repeated incidents on social media, particularly with regard to education, where white people co-opt the term equity for their own purposes. Can you please suggest resources to help raise the awareness of what equity means?
That's a great question, because I also see it being misused, right? It's really quickly, because I know but it's a very specific term that's talking about actionable steps that can be taken, right, to improve, as I said on my slide, right, to improve this situation that we're talking about and to improve the diverse employee population. And people kind of make it more fluffy than that. In terms of specific blogs or things of that nature, I'd have to look into that, because honestly, just really quickly, a lot of the things that I talked about today were from my experience as a recruiter at Fortune 500 companies. But like I said, definitely more than happy to kind of get together a comprehensive resource list. If anyone's interested, I can definitely then shoot that out to anybody who would want that. And I'll definitely make sure to include links and things of that nature.
So I think while a couple of more questions did come in, maybe what we'll do is, because we do need to, it's 2:05 and we need to wrap it up. We're going to have the transcript of all the questions and the questions asked in chat, and we can try to summarize those and address those with responses and or resources in a follow-up email. So
yeah, absolutely.
If that sounds good. And yes, so I want to thank you, Patricia, for your time today. And I really appreciate, the commitment and the dedication, as Tufts is not your alma mater.
Of course.
It's Rutgers, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you?
But I think this was, you know, a much needed webinar, and I hope all of our attendees, you know, got as much out of it as I did. So you'll be hearing from me and from Patricia. I'll send a follow-up email with survey and another email with a link to the recording once we get it up on our YouTube playlist. And you can all see how to get in touch with Patricia directly on her last slide here, but we'll send out that information too. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending and for the wonderful questions. I will definitely, you know, get some answers back to you guys, like I said, with a list of links and resources as well. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, take care, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
All right. Let me just recording.